welcome to today's webinar. My name is Peter Messmer, and I'm the Director of Growth here at AdShoppers. And today, we're going to cover one of the most common questions that we get here at AdShoppers from clients and prospective clients and pretty much everybody that we're connected with. So one of the big things that people ask about is, what do you do with all the social data that's out there? So networks like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google+, have a wealth of data on your customers. So what do you do with it? How do you get it? What do you do once you get it? And the big why. Why should you worry about collecting this data, storing it, and putting it to use? What's the big idea? How is it going to impact your store and eventually help you sell more? So that's one of the biggest questions that we get here at AdShoppers. So we decided to put this webinar together for you guys and tell you, exactly what you should do with social data and how to put it to use. So this should help answer that question for you guys if this is something that you have wondered about. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So like I said, my name is Peter Messmer, and I'm really excited to kick off this webinar for you guys. If you have any questions as we go through here, you should know the drill, but use the GoToWebinar Q&A function and let us know what's on your mind, and we will have a Q&A session at the end where we will take any and all questions. A little bit about AdShoppers before we get going here, so I'm not going to lay on a full, long pitch, but to give you guys a little bit of background of what we do. We basically help commerce marketers move with more agility, and basically what we do is, to put it into an analogy, we take your e-commerce store and we put it back in the hands of the marketers rather than getting tied up in 2, 3, 4, 5 departments, so that you guys, the marketers, can do what you want to do, move quickly, and launch the campaigns that you want to launch to eventually end up driving more conversions, revenue, increasing revenue per visitor, and things like that. So that's a little bit about us. You can see some fun pictures from our team on the left and some of the clients that we serve on the right. And with that said, let me go ahead and introduce you guys to the presenter that you're going to be hearing from today. So right next to me is Chad Ledford. He is the CRO and co-founder today, and you will be hearing from him. He has a lot of experience firsthand with these issues, so you guys are in for a real treat today. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Chad, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay, great. Thank you, Peter. So just to kind of elaborate on what Peter was talking about a second ago around all of this first-party social data, I think it's pretty obvious for a lot of people who track companies like Facebook or Twitter, or a lot of these companies that are really built around the data that they collect. So Facebook specifically, I think it's undeniable that with the data they've been able to collect, so everything from the email address of people, the things that people like, the birthdays of the customer base that they have, the status updates that customers are posting to Facebook, all of that data, Facebook essentially has a huge repository of what customers are engaging with. And they figured out how to monetize that and have become a really successful company from it. So the whole concept of first-party data in general is that you as a marketer or as a brand, all of the customer engagements with your brand, whether it's on social or the things that customers do on site, all of that is considered your first-party data. So first-party data is going to be anything that your audience or your customer base is doing that you as the brand can control, track, and start to create segments and things from. Third-party data is going to be anything that happens on a third-party network that you can kind of pair back in with your data. So for this conversation, we're going to specifically talk about all of the different types of first-party data as it relates to social. We're going to go through some of the data points that you're actually able to collect and things that you're going to be able to start building personalized marketing from, how you can actually capture that social data, how you can use it to arm some of the other marketing campaigns that you run, and if you invest in that, ultimately you want to see results from it. So we're also going to go through some of the results of all of this data and then integrating it back into your different types of marketing campaigns. So first-party social data, just to give you a better idea of some of the data points that you're able to collect from these social networks, it's going to include everything from first name, last name, email address, birthday, gender, location. You can pull in things like cloud score from specific networks, how many times customers have shared out, how much traffic they've driven for you, have they driven revenue, what is their profile picture. All this data that you see over here on the right is what we consider first-party data. This is data on your audience, your customer base, and it's data that once you start collecting it gives you a better view of what your customers actually look like. So more specifically, whenever we talk about data like this, you're going to be able to get a lot of this from Facebook, but it's definitely not the only source of data. As you can see here, different networks provide different data points that you're going to want to collect. And the key here is to take all of the data across all of these networks and then kind of pull that back into a single profile of each individual customer. So Twitter, for example, they're not going to give you email, but they are going to give you things like gender or their Twitter handle so that you can track their engagement going forward. And Instagram is a newer one here, but you can see over on the right some of the data points that they offer. Facebook does give you the richest amount of data, but the other networks are still worth considering and networks that you're going to want to pull into that single profile. So how do you actually start to capture some of this social data that we're talking about? One of the most popular ways to do this is social login. So social login is really starting to pick up momentum, especially as mobile continues to grow and mobile traffic continues to grow across e-commerce stores. You can see a couple examples of social login over here on the left. It's anything from sign in with Facebook, sign in with Amazon, Google, or any of the various networks. And the way that it works, a customer would click sign in with Facebook, and then that logs them into your e-commerce store using the information that they've already provided the social network. And it also gives you, the marketer, any of the data that you request from the customer because they opt in once they approve the OAuth application. So one of the most common questions that we get around social login is how many customers would actually use social login versus just creating another email or a password that they have to remember for another website. And what we're seeing so far is that the average is around 20%, but it kind of depends on your demographic. If you have an older demographic, you'd be surprised how many of those people are comfortable using Facebook and Google, but it is going to be a lower number. If it's a younger and it's skewed towards female, you're going to be closer to 40% of your customer base that is more likely to use social login. This is also skewed whenever we're talking about desktop versus mobile. On desktop, you're going to see a lower social login usage versus mobile. And our hypothesis behind that is customers are more familiar with using social login on their phones because a lot of apps that you download and a lot of games and things like that already have OAuth or some sort of sign-in with Facebook available. And customers are just getting more comfortable using those options to sign in so that they don't have another password that they have to remember. So down below there, you can also see the most frequent networks for social login, or which ones most people end up using. Facebook's the leader here at 57%, followed by Google at around 33%. So essentially, if you have sign in with Facebook and sign in with Google, you're going to be able to capture around 90% of all customers that are going to be using social login. Another way to capture a lot of this first-party data is through the sharing buttons that you have throughout your site. So what we see a lot of retailers doing is implementing solutions like an add this or share this, or you just kind of put those sharing buttons on there as an afterthought. And it's really a missed opportunity to get a better handle on who your customers are and what they're showing an interest in. Referral campaigns are another way to get customers to opt in and start passing some of this data back in into any of the systems that you want it to go into. So setting up something like a referral program where customers can get 20% off if they refer a friend, or any type of incentive or referral-based campaign. Once customers opt into those programs, that's also going to feed back in and allow you to capture a lot of this first-party data that we're talking about. You can also get this from referring source interaction. So for everybody that's listening in on this, if I were to send you a link from a referral campaign and you interact with that link, that's another opportunity to capture a lot of this engagement and first-party data that you're going to be able to pass back into some of your marketing efforts later. So let's assume that you get a couple of these things in place. You get social login, you've got some sharing buttons, and you have potentially some incentive-based campaigns where customers are passing this data, they're opting in, and they're giving it to you as a marketer. So what do you actually start doing with this? So we found that taking this data and specifically passing it into 3 different systems has some of the highest impacts on results, which we'll get to in a minute. But the first one is going to be your ESP, or your email sending provider. So let's say that you're using someone like a Bronto or MailChimp or whoever you're using to send email through. Once you have this data stored and you have all this customer insight, then you're able to send more tailored email campaigns around those. The second one that we'll take a quick look at is your CRM, which is going to give you a better indication of what these customers look like at a holistic level. And then the third one is your DMP, or your data management platform. This one is mostly underutilized by a lot of e-commerce companies. It's really popular within media companies and some larger software companies, but for the most part, a data management platform, or one place where you have all of your customer insights stored, and then you're able to store all of that audience data. A lot of retailers are missing out on that right now, and I'll show you a couple examples that you might want to consider for that. So the first one here, your ESP, to be able to send personalized emails. You can see down below, once you have the customer's Facebook picture, once you have their first name, last name, their birthday, and you're able to start sending these type of targeted emails, you get a much higher response rate from these. And the one down below, it's pulling in Joe England's Facebook picture, and it's asking if your friend wants to save 20% off. But you can also use a lot of this first-party data to power things like a birthday campaign, or segmenting out your emails from male versus female, or younger demographics from older demographics, and any of the other data that you're storing. On the CRM side, really the goal is, at a CRM level, at least the way that we use it and most of our clients use it, is to just push back in the data that you have on any of your customer interactions. So it's really about helping to complete that 360-degree customer profile, or that customer view. So you can see down below here, we're looking at Peter Messmer. This is inside of Pardot, which is linked to Salesforce for us, but everything from Facebook picture, first name, last name, email address, and all of the other insights that you can store, you want to push those back into your CRM so that you have one centralized view. And even if you don't know what to do with some of this data yet, it's really important that you continue to store it and you have it available whenever you do need it. At the DMP level, you can mostly use this to power on-site personalization. So again, a DMP is where you store all of your audience data. So let's pretend that Bree, or Gabrielle, has come to your site and she hasn't been on the site for a while, or she comes to your site and it's her birthday. You're able to show different promotions like happy birthday and give certain incentives to individual customers. You're also still able to use things like their profile pictures or their handles, like their Twitter handle or anything else that's being stored. You can use that to start personalizing the shopping experience. So I know a lot of retailers kind of just throw up generic things like a pop-up modal where you just continue to ask for email address or whatever else it might be. But this is an example of layering and personalization and a lot of this first-party data we're talking about. So now we've got a pretty good understanding of what this type of data is, how we can start to capture it, and a couple of use cases. So if you actually spend the time to invest in these things, what's the outcome of this going to be? So let's look at a few examples. The first one here is going to be referring source targeting. So this would be taking any customer who comes from your Facebook posts or your interactions that you have on Facebook. They click through to those links and then they come back to your website. by using that type of referring source targeting and capturing that data point, you can show promotions like the one that we're looking at here that says Facebook exclusive offer, click connect with Facebook to get $10 off your next purchase. These type of more referring source targeting, we see about a 29% increase in customers engaging with these versus generic things like asking for an email address. Contests and giveaways are another great way to use this type of data. A lot of people run contests that say, hey, use a hashtag and you'll be entered to win, or like us on Facebook, or give us your email address to enter a contest. But once you layer in a lot of social data, so things like sharing and referral data, it's going to help boost the performance of the entire contest and giveaway. So down below, this is the results from a contest that we ran with Silver Jeans, and you can see that the sharing, by layering that in, increased over 4,000%. The referral traffic that they were getting from social networks was boosted close to 2,000%, and even the email subscribers was boosted by over 200% compared to just running a generic campaign that was built around a customer giving their email address. You can also use this type of data to power things like wish lists. So you can see down below here, this is David's list, and it creates a more personalized experience for customers who are creating things like a birthday list or a Christmas list or a we moved into a new house list. Whatever the list is that they're creating, once they own that list, they know who they are and what they're interested in. It increases the sharing that happens, and it also increases the overall stickiness of your website. Another way that we've used this data is by powering one-to-one personalized offers. So you can see down below here that we're saying happy birthday Mike, and we're giving Mike $25 because it's his birthday. These type of personalized offers, they generally grow revenue anywhere from 10 to 15%. We have a few case studies that we pulled together, but for the most part, I think most customers are kind of getting tired of just seeing generic pop-ups. They realize that it's just different types of marketing promotions. But once you layer in social data like the customer's Facebook picture and their name, it's a lot easier to get their attention and keep them shopping. To kind of take that a step further, you can layer this in with things like abandonment targeting. So down below we can see that this would be an example of Peter about to leave a website, and we're offering Peter 10% off to stay. And whenever he stays, we see about a 16% higher conversion rate by layering in this type of data on abandonment. So putting this into your referral campaigns also has a lot of benefits. You see a large increase in the amount of customers who join the referral program or stay engaged with the referral program. Again, we're using Bree's Facebook picture, her name, and her email and everything to track all of her engagement. But again, it's all about layering in. Once you have this data, how can you start using it throughout all of your marketing efforts? So that's kind of the high level of what you can do with a lot of this first-party data. Over on the right side, you'll see a questions and answers box. So hopefully you've had a chance to get the wheels turning, and feel free to drop in your questions over there. I'm going to pass it back over to Peter for the Q&A portion of this.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with some of the questions that have already come in. So we're just going to handle these in chronological order. So first questions get answered first. So first question here is this looks it's around data. So how can we protect the customer's data?
Yeah, so data privacy and personally identifiable information, it's always kind of a tough subject because in general there's not a whole lot of regulation around it. But the best way to protect your customer data is obviously storing it in a secure environment and then limiting the amount of data that gets passed in between multiple systems. So really the key there is to minimize your risk through things like trustee certification. If you haven't looked into that before, I definitely encourage it. It can help boost your conversion rates, and at the same time it acts as a backstop against customer privacy and security. And then in general, you just want to make sure that if someone did get into your servers, or if they did get into wherever you have all this data stored, that they're not able to essentially download your entire customer list and pull all of the various data points that we're talking about here. So the best way to protect the data, again, is just make sure you have all those preventative measures in place. Be sure you have a really tight privacy policy, and you always want to give customers the ability to opt out if they need to.
All right, next up. So next question here is, if we capture someone's email on Facebook, for example, how do you handle potential CAN spam violations?
Yeah, so whenever customers give you their Facebook email, usually they'll go through an OAuth process. So you've probably seen that before. If you've ever done sign in with Facebook, it'll ask you to approve XYZ brand's Facebook application. And as part of that, they're giving you access to their email address. If you want to add in another layer, if you're kind of in a regulated industry or something like that, you can always add a double opt-in. So once they give you access to their Facebook information, then you can send off an email that asks them to verify that they do actually want to join marketing promotions. But for the most part, they're giving you information, or they're giving you access to that information whenever they approve the OAuth application.
Cool. Next question here. So can this be used to help my retargeting? And if so, what kind of cool things can you do with this data?
Yeah, I think we're still kind of in the early days of things like lookalike targeting and CRM targeting, but the basic idea is once you have a customer's email address, how can you map that against other customers that look like the customers you already have? So that's usually how most customers use this type of data. Once you start building out these customer profiles and you know that females in California between 24 and 35 are the highest converting traffic sources, then you can start to use that for some of your targeting efforts or your retargeting to know the type of customers that you want to keep going after. And again, it's all about figuring out these different types of customer segments, learning more about your audience and your customers, and then using that to power some of the marketing that you're doing on the back end.
All right, next up here. So we're getting close to the end of the questions that have come in, so we're going to be wrapping up if we don't get any more questions in the next couple of minutes. So if you have anything, go ahead and get it in now before we finish up here. All right, next question. So it sounds like a lot of this data comes from Facebook. So is that the only network I should be concerned with?
Yeah, so Facebook's obviously has the biggest repository of this type of audience and customer data. So you definitely want to start there. Once you have that in place, then you want to start layering in things like I would probably recommend Google next. And then if you're in B2B, you're going to want to look at LinkedIn and seeing what data you can pull from those networks. If you're more direct to consumer, then you're going to want to look at Twitter. Obviously, Instagram is a newer one that we're just starting to get a handle on, but any of those networks, wherever your audience is or wherever you think your customer base is, those are the networks that you want to be tapped into so that you can start to not only leverage the data that they already have, but start storing that yourself so that you as a marketer can actually put the data into action.
All right, so last question here, kind of actually similar to the last one, but what if most of my customers don't use Facebook?
Yeah, I think I don't know who doesn't have a Facebook profile, so even if they don't actively use Facebook, at some point they gave Facebook a lot of information, and you really want to be able to tap into that so that you can pull in all the information that they've already given to them. If you feel like none of your customers have ever used Facebook, then they're probably using something like LinkedIn or Google. So you have to be selective about which networks you want to tie into and which ones you really want to spend your time on. But for the most part, you don't want to exclude Facebook. You always want to make sure that that one's on your priority list because they have so much scale.
All right, so that's all of the questions, so that will conclude the Q&A portion of this webinar. So a couple notes as we wrap up here. So one question that we always get every time we do a webinar is, will the recording be available afterwards? And the answer to that is yes. If you are live right now, you'll be getting a copy of the recording via email either later today or early tomorrow. Other couple things, if you're interested in ad shoppers or learning a little bit more about us and what we can do and taking a quick look at our platform, best way to do that is to join an upcoming live demo. We have those every 2 weeks on Thursdays, so just go to adshoppers.com/live-demo. You should see the link there at the bottom of the screen. And that's pretty much it. So any other questions you guys have, just feel free to get in touch with us and we can help you out with whatever you're wondering about. And that is all. So thank you everybody for showing up, and we hope to talk to you guys soon.